So, this took place just last year during a road trip in Montana. I was 19 at the time, and my friends and I were going on a road trip to LA. I know, pretty far away from Montana, but high school was almost over, and we've been planning this trip for months now. To put the story in better perspective, it was me, my friend Dan, and his girlfriend Samantha. It was a quiet Friday night, and we were driving on a dark road out into the countryside by a cornfield. While Dan and Samantha were asleep, I was focusing on driving, trying my best to stay awake. I'm driving for about 10 more minutes when I see a bright light in the distance on the side of the road. At first, I thought that it could have been a fire, but because it wasn't moving, I wasn't too sure. Upon closer inspection, I then came to the realization that it was a car with its headlights still on. Growing up in rural Montana, this was commonly a sign of locals picking corn from the field. However, it was well past 1 a.m. and was pitch dark out with the exception of the moon, so it didn't make any sense. I slowly approached the car and parked behind it. It was at this point that I woke up Samantha and Dan to tell them about it. Samantha begins to talk about how it wasn't any of our business and to just move on, while Dan, on the other hand, wanted to check it out. I hesitantly agree with Dan, and we both start searching the car while Samantha volunteered to look in the field. What made the situation so odd was that all 4 doors to the car were wide open, as if whoever was here left in a hurry. Upon searching the car, we didn't find anything except for a few beer bottles and a notebook. Nothing as interesting as we thought. We closed the doors of the car and are heading back when we both hear the blood-curdling scream of Samantha. Not thinking anything of it, we both sprint into the field yelling for her name. Long story short, I eventually find her in a small clearing, and once I saw what she was screaming at, my blood ran cold. There, laying on a batch of hay, was a woman who looked to be no older than 30, dead. In the heat of the moment, something told me that this wasn't some suicide. The thing that I remember most vividly about her was her face she had died with. It was a look of pure terror, as if she were scared for her life from whatever had been done to her. Her eyes glared directly at us as her lifeless body laid there with blood rolling down her lip. Whoever killed her must have used hay to put around her to act as some sort of burial. We knew that she couldn't have been here for long, as it looked like she had been dead for, at most, a day or 2. In that moment, there was nothing we could do, as it would take too long for the proper authorities to get here. With no other options, we made the hard choice to get out of there while we could, not looking back. We didn't speak about that incident for the whole trip and never once mentioned it to any of our family or friends. I don't know why or how she died, but in all honesty, I don't want to know. Dan and I still reflect back on that night till this day and wonder what might have happened to us had we stayed a minute later. That is the question that still haunts me till this day. I'm a female, currently 28, and I just moved into a small apartment building in New York with my son, who was 4 at the time. My fiance died just last year with my daughter in a car accident caused by a drunk driver. After a year of my son and I going through all of that, I decided that we needed to move on with our lives and start fresh. At the time, we lived in Texas and had moved to New York as the pay was better and there were more openings for employment. Anyway, it was the day before Halloween and I had taken my son to go to a pumpkin patch for kids that was being held by the county. It was one of those annual family-friendly events to take pictures of your child type of thing. It was a one-time thing, and with the virus going around, trick-or-treating was basically canceled, so I wanted to do something special for him. When we arrived, there was a few kids there taking pictures of pumpkins, carving them, etc. I watched my son play in the hay while taking pictures of him when I noticed a man about 10 feet away observing the scenery. Now, I'm not the type of person to make assumptions, but there was something about him that seemed kind of off. He wore a plain white shirt and some shorts and was carrying a camera around him. I dismissed it as him being another parent until I noticed him acting a bit strange with it. He kept zooming in places wherever there were kids and was constantly looking around for anyone who might have been suspicious. I think nothing of it and continue to walk around with my son when I hear someone yell, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The guy is petrified and stood still as a statue as these two teenage boys confiscated his camera. They look through it and one of them jumps the man and they get into a full-on fight. It lasted for about a good minute before security got involved. Turns out, this guy was wanted for sexual harassment and had been in and out of prison several times. He was recently released but was put on probation due to good behavior and was in control of his impulse. They looked through his camera and found pictures of him zooming into children's faces and areas. He was, of course, arrested and I never saw him again. I advise everyone to please take my story as a piece of advice and always watch out for your kids. Bad people are everywhere. It was the late fall of 2019, and my mom had just gotten out of a very long and abusive relationship with my dad. We had lived with him for about 13 years or so before he started going out drinking and coming home with his outbursts. I was an only child and was 14, so my mom was fed up and left him after 2 years. We moved out of state to go live with my extended family in South Texas as we were more than welcome to stay with them. The house they lived in was a nice 2-storied house that was built in the late 90s. Even though it was aging fast, it was still a really nice house. Sometimes my mom and my aunt would go out doing errands while I was told to watch after my little cousin, Jake. I didn't mind staying alone because I liked hanging out with Jake for the most part as he didn't cause any problems. One night, my mom was going to run some errands while my aunt was at work. She was the kind of person who spent long hours out shopping for the best deals and used a lot of coupons whenever she could. I, of course, didn't want to be involved with any of that, so I decided to stay home and watch Jake. It's around 6 p.m. and I sit Jake in front of the TV and let him watch whatever show was on while I went on my Switch. Then, after about 5 minutes, our dog is at the door scratching, letting me know that he wanted to go out. Now, we only let him out if someone is there to watch him, as he sometimes finds a way to escape from the backyard. Since Jake seemed to be occupied with his show, I let the dog out and watched him do his business before telling him to come back in. He obeys and comes walking back when I hear Jake crying. I hurry back inside and try to calm him down, but he's just wailing for no apparent reason. It was then when he turns his head and points into the pitch black boiler room. The door is about halfway open and I instantly got chills as I stared into the darkness. At this point, Jake is still crying, so I pick him up and carry him into my room and let him play on my iPad to calm him down. About an hour goes by and my mom and aunt pull in and I tell them about Jake. My aunt, being the tough woman she was, went into the boiler room to see what had happened. A few minutes later, she came back and asked me something that still terrifies me till this day. The window to the boiler room is broken and there's a ladder placed up against it. Did you know about that? This took place when I was about 19 years old, and this is something that nobody should ever have to go through. To cut to the chase, it was Halloween night of 2010, and my friends and I had been invited to a Halloween party from a few classmates that was open to pretty much anyone. Kind of like what you'd expect at a block party. I was not the most popular girl in school, so I really didn't know anyone except for the friend I was going with. There were lights, food, music, and they even had a pool in the back, which was off limits for whatever reason. My friend was busy getting wasted with a few guys, and I was that awkward third wheel girl who didn't know what to do. Eventually, I grabbed a couple of beers and went outside to go smoke by some trees since smoking obviously wasn't allowed inside. So I'm smoking a cigarette and practically chugging my beers by a tree, enjoying that cool October breeze when I look to my left and see some guy walking towards me. I give him a quick wave to say hello and he nervously says hi. At first, I thought he was from the party. But the more I noticed him, the more I began to realize that he didn't look like he belonged here. Most of us were high school aged. This guy looked like he was in his mid-40s or 50s. His eyes were red and his face was pale, and he wore a dirty white undershirt with cargo pants. He walked right up to me and said, "Got any more smokes? I could use one." I reply with, "Sure thing." I give him my lighter and he takes a few puffs and immediately throws it onto the ground and stomps on it. It was a bit unexpected, but I didn't feel threatened. I tell him it was nice meeting him and that I was going back inside to meet my friend. All of a sudden, he tells me to wait and that he wanted to show me something he found deeper into the trees. Now, seeing as I was extremely tipsy, I accepted, and he grabs my hand and we descend into the woods. We walk for about 3 minutes and I could barely hear the music at this point. We then come to a stop. He sighs and he says that what he wanted to show me was right here. Before I could ask what it was, he grabs my arm and covers my mouth tight. I'm trying to fight to get out of his grasp, but this guy was much more bigger and stronger than I was, and being drunk didn't help. I'm trying to scream, but his hand was on my mouth hard, clearly trying to suffocate me. Eventually, he lets go of my arm for a brief second, and at that point, I saw my chance. I turn around and kick him in the kneecap, causing him to fall to the ground screaming. I'm screaming as well, while running all the way back to the party where I saw a few people looking at me with confused looks. I begin to tell them that I was almost groped, and they take me back inside to inform everybody. The host of the party calls the cops, and our Halloween party turned into that of a crime scene. Needless to say, the man was never found, and nothing ever happened like that after that one Halloween night.